The views expressed on this broadcast of the Take 12 Recovery Radio Show do not necessarily reflect those of KHLT Recovery Broadcasting or its affiliates. KHLT and Take12Radio.com are not affiliated with any particular 12-step fellowship.
Remember me, I'm the one down on the floor, telling these people that I ain't there anymore. Calling in the street, just about to lose my mind.
Welcome to Walking Through the Big Book with Chris Schroeder and Monty Meyer. And now, here's those two guys who investigate prior to contempt, Chris and the Monty'man.
Well, greetings and salutations. I think that's, who said that? Greetings and salutations. Can't remember
I think it was Plato.
No, but I'm talking about the cartoon character.
Oh, okay.
I think it was Winnie the Pooh or something. I'm not really sure. Greetings and salutations. Oh no, I know who it was. It was Charlotte from Charlotte's Web. She would say to Zuckerman's famous pig. She would say, "Greetings and salutations," and she would sew it into her web, and that just made everybody cheery and happy and full of serenity. Well, today, folks, I hope we can do even a little better than that and sew into our web of success, freedom, and recovery some more of this wonderful book, the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that we not only read it, but that we can absorb some of this stuff so we can apply and implement it. And it's good to have you on the show. Chris Schroeder, of course, is the one who's taking us through this wonderful book in this show, Walking Through the Big Book. And we are on Chapter 8, which is To the Wise. But you want to say anything before we start this thing, Chris?
Yeah, we finished the main body of the book, Monty, up through working with others, and a lot of times, big book studies will stop at that point. I think more often than not, that's what happens, and sometimes the following 4 chapters are overlooked and really aren't looked at closely. I'll give you for instance the chapter to wives. When I was first handed this book, I thought, okay, I can skip that chapter. I'm not a wife.
Right.
And then when I saw the family afterward, I thought to myself, I don't have a family afterward. My family left. If there was a chapter called the family that split when I needed them most, I would read the chapter. But there's so much information in these chapters. There's principles. There's philosophy, there's perspectives we can really find guiding if we pay attention to them.
I've even heard some people say that after they read actually it's pronounced or spelled out 2 wives, that they realized it was more for them than their wives.
There's a very, very important piece in this. I'm not sure if we'll get to it today, but it's the description of the types of alcoholics,
right.
1, 2, 3, and 4, and it explains the progressive scale of alcoholism, and it enables you to place your husband or your loved one into a category. How powerless are they? How much trouble are they in? And I think that information should be used for sponsors, for us. Mm-hmm. I think it's a good gauge, like how far down the scale have we've gone. It's invaluable, and it is in To Wives, but it could have been anywhere in this book, and made the same kind of sense.
Sure. So folks, if you are sitting there going, I don't know, this is to our wives. I'm going to go get Mary and have her sit down on the couch because she needs to hear this, and I'm going to go out and work on the car. No, you stay put. And it's not fair if you and your wife are sitting there, or your girlfriend or whoever, and you start nudging her with your elbow when you think it applies to her. People do that all the time. See, honey? See? Don't be doing that because...
or underlining the part that says you shouldn't nag.
Yeah, right.
And showing that to your wife.
Yeah, you bet.
Al-Anon has kind of flipped some of this stuff on its head a little bit. But, alcoholism is a family illness. Any legitimate treatment center these days, one of the things they want to do is they want to engage the family in the recovery and treatment process, because they realize how pivotal it is for those closest to an alcoholic to have the right attitude, to have the right behavior when you're confronted, number one, with an active alcoholic, and number two, with one who's struggling their way into recovery.
Yeah.
So, there's information here we can all use. You could almost title this chapter to the sponsor or to the family member, and it almost still would be valid.
Okay, Chapter 8, Two Wives. And this says, there's a little asterisk on here that says, written in 1939, where there were few women in AA.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. When you look back at some of the history of this fellowship and its co-founders, you look under some rocks and you find some stuff that didn't make it into the conference-approved literature. But one of the things was they, Bill and Bob did not want women in AA. I mean, they certainly wanted to have them in the meetings, but they didn't want them as members in Alcoholics Anonymous. And there needed to be some things that really changed that for them. You have to understand the time. You need to put this all in context. The mid-30s was a very much different time than we have today, as far as equality and equal rights and an equal perspective on the sexes. Back then, it was a man's world back then. And they really thought that by bringing women into the as members of the fellowship, that was going to louse it up. And they avoided that for a while until Florence Rankin, I believe, was the first one who battled her way into a meeting and insisted on membership. And they thought, oh, all right, okay. They kind of acquiesced. And over the course of time, I believe women are nudging toward breaking the 50% barrier in Alcoholics Anonymous today, and that's only in the last several years. But they're inching up on 50% of the membership. So so things have changed, and as they should have, really. And, but again, why hasn't the discriminatory type of perspective of women that comes through in this chapter, why hasn't it been changed? They're afraid to change anything in this because it's led to so many recoveries. They don't know how much they can take out without losing some of the magic.
Right.
So most of the people who are advocates of the book Alcoholics Anonymous get freaked out when there's any motion on any table to make any changes in this book. And so we're gonna have this document in its present form for a long time to come. I'm in that camp too. I would rather explain away some of the problems with how it was written and the way it was written than I would to allow some muttonhead in New York to rewrite it.
Yeah, and like you said a long time, I think it was probably one of our first shows, you said there probably isn't any group of people that are qualified to do it anyway.
Here's my perspective, okay? Everyone in Alcoholics Anonymous back then had gone through the steps. You're very much left alone in today's fellowship, and a lot of times people that take service commitments and climb their way down the service ladder from GSR to DSM to all the way to trustees and board members. There's no litmus test for, hey, have you actually recovered? Have you actually taken the steps? Have you gone out and made your amends? How's your prayer and meditation? Or, how many people have you worked with? Have you taken through this work? Those aren't questions that get asked. They got asked back around the time that this book was written, but they don't get asked now. So you can be placing this document in the hands of people who absolutely have no experience with it, don't understand the importance of it, don't recognize it from an experiential level, just see it as, an old book that needs to be re-edited. And I would never want that to happen, because back in 1939, you're looking at almost 100% of the people who had gone through the step. You look today in any 12-step fellowship, and you're looking at an extreme minority of people who actually have real experience with the step.
Yeah, I see that.
So it's a completely different world, and I trust it much less, especially with foundational literature and documents that define basically what recovery consists of.
Sure. All right, chapter 8.
Okay, to wives. Here's another thing about this chapter before I get going. This is some of the oral tradition that wraps around this chapter. Bill Wilson understands that he needs to address the wife, and he doesn't feel real comfortable doing it. So he asks Ann Smith. Ann Smith is Dr. Bob's wife. Ann Smith is also one of the most overlooked figures in Alcoholics Anonymous history. Bill Wilson did call her one of the founders. But the fact of the matter is, Monty, was that when Bill moved out to Akron, when he found his new buddy, Dr. Bob, and moved out to Akron, Ann Smith was running Oxford group meetings. Okay, her and Henrietta Seiberling and a number of other people, had this down. They'd been doing it for years, and they would do the guided meditations, and they would read from the Bible, and they would practice these spiritual principles. And Bill and Bob were basically, coming in and learning from Ann Smith and Henrietta Seiberling and a number of other people in the Oxford group. They were learning their spiritual disciplines. So when Bill Wilson decides, I need to have a chapter written by a wife, he felt really comfortable aiming that at Ann Smith. Ann declined. Now, meanwhile, Lois is waiting in the wings going, he's going to ask me now, and he never does. Instead, he comes to the conclusion that he should write the chapter to wives. So what we're going to be reading here is basically Bill Wilson pretending he's a wife. And that, let's just use that as a context, and that should not negate any of the importance of the material in here. But it is kind of a skewed perspective, and can even lead to more of the chauvinistic kind of verbiage that you're going to find in here.
Yeah.
But we should set all that aside, and we should look for the principles and the perspective, because those are right on the money. Anyway, to wives. With few exceptions, our book thus far has spoken of men, but what we have said applies quite as much to women. Our activities in behalf of women who drink are on the increase. There is every evidence that women regain their health readily as men if they try our suggestion. Again, here Bill is talking about something that he really doesn't have a lot of experience with yet. However, he was right. He usually was right. There really had only been one woman in the meetings at that time, and she relapsed. But for every man who drinks, others are involved. The wife who trembles in fear of the next debauch, the mother and father who see their son wasting away. Among us are wives, relatives, and friends whose problem has been solved, as well as some who have not yet found a happy solution. We want the wives of Alcoholics Anonymous to address the wives of men who drink too much. What they say will apply to nearly everyone bound by ties of blood or affection to an alcoholic. As wives of Alcoholics Anonymous, we would like you to feel that we understand as perhaps few can. We want to analyze mistakes we have made. We want to leave you with the feeling that no situation is too difficult and no unhappiness too great to be overcome. We have traveled a rocky road. There is no mistake about that. We've had long rendezvous with hurt pride, frustration, self-pity, misunderstanding, and fear. These are not pleasant companions. We've been driven to maudlin sympathy, to bitter resentment. Some of us have veered from extreme to extreme. ever hoping that one day our loved ones would be themselves once more. You know, that is one of the saddest things with people who love alcoholics. They're not going to understand the nature of alcoholism. They're really going to keep thinking things like, you know, when it gets really bad, I'm sure he's just going to, you know, stop. Or, you know, it can't get much worse than this. I know he loves me. I mean, you know, there's all of these perspectives that have to do with the misunderstanding that loved ones have that the alcoholic can do better.
Sure.
That the alcoholic can stop drinking, that the alcoholic can stop behaving badly. That there's a complete misunderstanding, thinking that if they just really want to, they will.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so that causes a lot of problems. You know, you hang in there with somebody, and you're not promoting their own recovery. You're not doing things that are conducive to them finding recovery. You're just hoping that they'll hitch up their bootstraps and get about their life. And that comes from a complete misunderstanding of how aggressive an illness alcoholism is.
Yeah, the expectations and so forth, even to the point where, you know, that parents are forever saying this, what did I do wrong? He went out and relapsed.
Yeah.
What did I do wrong? And of course, if they don't understand, like many of us who have go through the program and apply it every day, that's actually a pride thing. You know, they don't understand it though. They haven't had that kind of thing, and you know, and have anything to apply and implement as far as tools like this. But parents and wives, what did I do wrong? What if I had done this? What if I had done that? Doesn't it sound like the alcoholic himself?
It does. It sounds just like the alcoholics whose ego wants to take responsibility for both drinking and recovery. You know, the ego wants to have control. Like, you know, I did this, I did that. Or one of the things that you hear in the family programs a lot is, I didn't cause it, I can't cure it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's very, very true. This is much more. It's much more about, do you have a body and a mind that is going to be susceptible to addictive illness? If you do, and you partake at all of alcohol or drugs, you're going to become addicted or alcoholic. It has to do with almost a predisposition. And yes, it can be inherited. We find that certain types of families or certain types of ethnic backgrounds have a higher percentage of alcoholism. It can be inherited, but I mean, is that really your fault as a parent if your child has addictive tendencies? It's really more physiological.
And isn't it
environmental? You know,
isn't it interesting, Chris? Isn't it interesting that we talk a lot about in recovery circles? We talk a lot about this is this or that is alcoholic thinking or alcoholic behavior, or this behavior is the ism and all that stuff, and credit some of our behaviors and our selfishness and everything else to alcoholism. And it's interesting to me because you can find anybody that is not an alcoholic, anybody that is not a narcotic addict, and they do the same things. They make assumptions. They have unreasonable expectations on people. They think that, if they just would have studied harder. I mean, the guy that goes in to pass his final in college and he studied to every degree that he can, and he still doesn't pass. And so he says, if I just studied harder, when he couldn't even have studied any harder. So, it's kind of like, I like what somebody said one time, I was a human being before I was an alcoholic.
Yeah, alcoholic thinking, is it possible that non-alcoholics think the same way?
Yeah, of course.
You would have to say yes. There's this huge movement today within the 12-step organizations that really think, talking about your alcoholic thinking, or the stupid things you did today, or they really think that by going and sitting in a circle for an hour and updating everybody about how they're thinking, is conducive to recovery. And I don't know where that came from, because I'll tell you what, how I sponsor. If somebody was going to call me up on the phone and say, okay, here, I did all this wrong, and these people are mad at me, and I went to the store today, and Annie Griselda came over, and I just can't, and just blither out all this updating me on their drama, all they would hear would be a dial tone. Okay. I am way not interested in what's going on, and many times when I'm sitting in a support group and people are doing that, I'm thinking to myself, why don't you tell a bunch of people that actually care what's going on in your life? Because I'm not one of them.
Yeah.
Where that came from, I have no idea. But when somebody calls me up for help and they share a situation with them that's a challenge, I give them an exercise to do. It can be do a 4-step on it. It can be go make an amend on it. It can be pray on it. It can be go work with another alcoholic. I'm going to give them an exercise. I'm not going to sit there and pat them on the head and say, "Oh, you're doing wonderful. You're doing wonderful." Obviously, they're not doing wonderful if they've still got issues. Issues are like tissues. You pull one out, another one's going to come out of the box behind it. I'm more about showing somebody how to resolve everything. Let's learn how to live so that we're not constantly churning up all the crap. And again, I don't know what this notion is that we should be telling everybody all of this intimate stuff that goes on in our head and with our families and all this. I really don't know how appropriate that is. The same energy you're using to do that, you could be actually helping another alcoholic.
Yeah.
You could be talking about a solution. In a beginner's meeting or something like that, it's quite appropriate to let them just rant on because they are still on the spin dry cycle.
Yeah.
But a good beginner's meeting will have a bunch of people in it who've got some time, who've recovered from alcoholism, and can share their experience, strength, and hope about how you can get away from all of that. Not how, I'm not interested in people that want to help you manage a life that you've already admitted is unmanageable. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's the craziest thing that you find, and I think the reason why some support group meetings have devolved into bad Bob Newhart therapy is because it comes out of the treatment centers that have group. There's tons of treatment centers that sit you around in group, and conflict resolution, and trying to get honest, and there's actual reasons that in a clinical setting they'll do that with you. But don't bring that into a recovery meeting. It's, treatment is about discovery. 12-step fellowship is about recovery. Those are really two different things. And it's time to move away from the bad Bob Newhart stuff and start moving forward in your life.
And I know we got to get back to wives, but I got to tell you, the thing that always cracks me up is when I see or I hear about that circle thing of your peers, and then you share whatever, and then your peers, the other alcoholics that may have just been sober for 3 days, they're asked to critique you, and I'm like, what? What are they? These guys all of a sudden became psychiatrists and doctors, and and they sit there and they rip you apart. And I'm like, what?
Monty, what's really sad is there's been some modern studies that show that there's no efficacy in the confrontational methodology in treatment.
That's right.
In other words, from the worst, shaving half of somebody's head and making them beg to have the other half shaved, to these confrontational type of groups where people just people just beat each other up. There's no efficacy in it. In other words, there's nothing that shows that it's helpful at all in the recovery of alcoholism or drug addiction.
Yeah.
Why people do it is, it goes all the way back to the early Synanon and therapeutic community models where, people are coming out of prison. You gotta keep them in shape somehow. But as far as just addiction and alcoholism, if you're in a treatment modality where that happens all the time, you're back. They haven't read much of the new literature coming out on what really works and what doesn't work in treatment. That's all I'll say.
Hey, we could make a lot of money just telling people, hey, listen, if you're feeling like you're blowing it today, call us up here at take12radio.com, and we'll make you a sign to put around your neck that says you're an idiot.
Yeah, it'll be the Don Rickles recovery program. We'll just scream at you and insult you for a half an hour, and there you go. That should keep you from drinking. Somebody yelling at you, that should keep you from drinking. I mean, where do you get this stuff? I have no idea. But again, we're dealing with an incredibly misunderstood illness, alcoholism. It's misunderstood by people that treat you for it, because. Not all the time is the person that's treating you from alcoholism an alcoholic who's gone through the 12 steps and had a spiritual awakening. A lot of times it's not. A lot of times it's somebody who, graduated a counselor program or, and they don't have any experience with it. They know the theories, but knowing the theories and actually being able to share an experience are two different things. Yeah. Again, discovery versus recovery.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Our loyalty and desire that our husbands hold up their heads and be like other men have begotten all sorts of predicaments. We have been unselfish and self-sacrificing. We have told innumerable lies to protect our pride and our husbands' reputations. We have prayed, we have begged, we have been patient, we have struck out viciously, we have run away, we have been hysterical, we have been terror-stricken, we have sought sympathy. We have had retaliatory love affairs with other men. That's a tough one. Our homes have been battlegrounds many an evening. In the morning, we have kissed and made up. Our friends have counseled chucking the men, and we have done so with finality, only to be back in a little while hoping, always hoping. Our men have sworn great solemn oaths that they were through drinking forever. We have believed them when no one else could or would. Then in days, weeks, or months, a fresh outburst. We seldom had friends to our homes, never knowing how or when the men of the house would appear. We could make few social engagements. We came to live almost alone. When we were invited out, our husbands sneaked so many drinks that they spoiled the occasion. If, on the other hand, they took nothing, their self-pity made them killjoys. This is ringing bells for me. That's
Me too.
Tell you, Monty.
Me too.
Because I'll tell you, every single time, my first wife is really the only one that ever saw me drinking. She would make me promise not to drink. This one time, Monty, I'm at a Christmas party that her boss is putting on in Colorado. Okay, it's up in one of these McMansions way up on the mountain, really rich guy, and she made me promise me you won't drink. Oh, I promise. Well, I found a bottle of vodka somewhere and chugged half of it down, and I got blithering, tongue-chewing drunk as a goat. And I remember she dragged me upstairs because I was like hitting on her secretary friends or something. She dragged me upstairs and she's yelling at me. You're embarrassing me. You've embarrassed me. I'm gonna go downstairs. I'm gonna get our coats and we're gonna leave before you do something else stupid. And she started shaking me. And when she let me go, I kind of stumbled backwards against the wall. And against the wall was this big, huge painting. It was like some gigantic Renoir, with a real innate, elaborate framework, right? And I banged into it against the wall, and it came crashing down onto the floor. It scared me, so I jumped away, and it fell against a chair and ripped.
Oh my goodness!
This is like $100,000 painting. You should have seen the look on her face. Oh man. And, she's like, oh! It's her boss paying. I'm sitting there like not, chuckling and delirious.
Yeah.
But But this is really ringing a bell.
Yeah, and the part about okay, so now we're going someplace where I know I'm not gonna be able to drink. There's no alcohol there, but it's a party, and I'm thinking, actually, come to the point on the way there. I have resolved the fact that I am not gonna be able to get any alcohol. So what do? I pout.
Oh yeah,
I'm not gonna have a good time.
I'm doing this for you.
That's
I'm
right.
not happy about it, but I'm doing this for you. And as soon as you get home, you start drinking like a fish.
Yeah.
I had a time where my boss said, usually I left work and I got drunk right away. I went right to the liquor store. Well, he surprised me. He goes, Chris, you're coming down to the shore with me. I need to do some work on my house. Get in the car. So, I had to. So I jump in the car with him when we drive down to the shore. We work on his house. I didn't get back home until like 8:45. Okay?
Uh-huh.
So the liquor store was, it was like 9:45. The liquor store was open at 10, and I hadn't done my drinking yet. I usually started my drinking around 4:30, 5 o'clock.
Uh-huh.
Now I'm behind schedule, okay? So I still have to put as much alcohol in my body as my, as my physical craving asks me to.
Yeah.
So instead of drinking from 5 to 9, I had to drink from 10 to 2. And I staggered into work the next day, still smelling like vodka. He's like, "What's the matter with you?" Well, I felt like telling him, "Well, you messed up my schedule." It's not my fault. You messed up my schedule. But so there were times when I had to postpone my drinking, and I was not happy about it.
Right.
There was never financial security. Positions were always in jeopardy or gone. An armored car could not have brought home the pay envelope. The checking account melted like snow in June. Sometimes there were other women. How heartbreaking was this discovery? How cruel to be told they understood our men as we did not. The bill collectors, the sheriffs, the angry taxi drivers, the policemen, the bums, the pals, even the ladies they sometimes brought home. Our husbands thought we were so inhospitable. Joy killer, nag, wet blanket. That's what they had said. Next day, they would be themselves again, and we would forgive and try to forget. We have tried to hold the love of our children for their father. We have told small tots that their father was sick, which was much nearer the truth than we realized. They struck the children, kicked out door panels, smashed treasured crockery, and ripped the keys out of pianos. So one thing I never did, Monty, I was never a piano key ripper. but all the other stuff I was guilty of. In the midst of such pandemonium, they may have rushed out, threatening to live with the other woman forever. In desperation, we've even gotten tight ourselves, the drunk to end all drunks. The unexpected result was that our husbands seemed to like it. Perhaps at this point we got a divorce and took the children home to father and mother. Then we were severely criticized by our husband's parents for desertion. Usually we did not leave. Back in the day, Monty, they really didn't leave. Today it's much easier to get a new plant stand.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah. Well, and I got to interject there. I know there's times that it just cannot be changed, or the relationship cannot. There's just not going to be restitution. I know that, but at the same time, I got to tell you, in sickness and in health doesn't mean the flu.
Yeah, it's very, very true. To be completely honest with you, I've suffered breakups, and this is only my own personal moral barometer. I think that the only reason someone should leave is if you're getting really emotionally ill in a relationship. In other words, if you're deteriorating really, really badly, and there's abuse, and you're suffering emotionally, if it's destroying you emotionally, I think if that is going on, I can see one of my sponsees leaving. But what I hate to see, what I really hate to see, and this happens a lot, is the wife or the husband stick with the alcoholic through thick or thin. They get sober, and they meet somebody in the first year or two in the recovery fellowships and run off with them.
Yeah, that's just sick.
I mean, I've seen that happen time and time again, and that's not recovery. If you're listening to this and you had a husband or a wife do that to you, run off, when they met somebody in their support group, understand that that's not recovery. That's untreated alcoholism not being treated because there is an attachment to moral and spiritual values in a recovery program.
Yeah.
And you're not just to leave because you're selfish and you want to leave.
Mm-hmm.
And you found a younger woman somewhere or something. That's not a good enough reason to leave. However, if if there's abuse, if there's violence, and if it's just day after day, it's getting worse and worse emotionally, and you're really, really becoming psychically ill because of a relationship, and that's usually because there's abuse or violence in it. Then I can see that as a valid reason for separation.
Well, and even I've had this discussion with people before. Even biblically, there are things, and I may be taking some liberty here, I'm not sure, but, my wife told me one time, I said, well, at least I've never cheated on you. And she says, really? Isn't that bottle the other woman?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a relationship, all right, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, you bet.
Absolutely. So, we've got some making up to do. We've got, we'll be getting to the chapter, The Family Afterward, and you'll really see there's some reconstruction ahead. I mean, we've torn the house down, timber by timber.
Mm-hmm.
We need to take responsibility for putting it back up. That's recovery. Splitting and running is certainly not recovery.
Right.
So the women say, we stayed on and on. We finally sought employment ourselves as destitution faced us and our families. We began to ask medical advice on the spree as the sprees got closer. The alarming physical and mental symptoms, the deepening tale of remorse, depression, and inferiority that settled down on our loved one. These things terrified and distracted us. As animals on a treadmill, we have patiently and weirdly climbed, falling back in exhaustion after every futile effort to reach solid ground. Most of us have entered the final stage with its commitment to health resorts, sanitariums, hospitals, and jails. Sometimes there were screaming delirium and insanity. Death was often near. Now, the majority of alcoholics showing up in the support groups today have not gotten to this point. There's all types of intervention and awareness and stuff. It's not as dark of an illness as it was back in the day, but that happened to me. I mean, I was living in a house with my family, and I was getting to the point where I was having screaming delirium tremens, where I thought I was going to die, and I was hallucinating, and I was seeing things, and I was convulsing, and that's an awful position to put a family in. Most often today, people understand that you call an ambulance, or you commit them, or you do something.
Mm-hmm.
Under these conditions, we naturally made mistakes. Some of them rose out of ignorance of alcoholism. Sometimes we sensed dimly that we were dealing with sick men. Had we fully understood the nature of the alcoholic illness, we might have behaved differently. Now, that's an important sentence there.
Yeah.
One of the things that they do today is that they engage the family in treatment processes, and there's almost always a reluctancy for the family to do that. They'll say, I'm not the alcoholic, he's the alcoholic. Why do I have to do all this stuff? Well, because you need to understand how you can be more conducive to the recovery process.
Mm-hmm.
There's attitudes and behaviors that you could have that could make things worse or that could make things better, and you don't know what they are because you have no understanding of alcoholism as an illness or recovery as a process.
Yeah.
So how much do you want your loved one to get better? If you really want your loved one to get better, I would say take the time and participate in this stuff. Go to the family programs. There's Al-Anon, there's Alateen, there's Alatot, there's Aladog. I mean,
there's Alapet.
Go to any of them, and and you can start to learn how to act, how to think, and how to behave differently, so that the alcoholic has a better chance of recovery.
And you know what? All joking aside, I don't know how anybody would ever do Allopet, but all joking aside, the pets in your family are affected by this drastically too. You watch what happens to a dog who unconditionally loves the dad or the mom who is a raging alcoholic, and watch what happens.
It's so sad.
Yeah.
Monty, I had about a half a dozen cats back when I was drinking. They all ran away. I mean, I haven't had a cat run away in 20 years since I've been sober. You know, I mean, they can pick up on, you know, the bad vibes pretty quickly, being an animal. How could men who love their wives and children be so unthinking, so callous, so cruel? There could be no love in such persons, we thought. And just as we were being convinced of their heartlessness, they would surprise us with fresh resolves and new attention. For a while, they would be their old sweet selves, only to dash the new structure of affection to pieces once more. Ask why they commenced to drink again, they would reply with some silly excuse or none. It was so baffling, so heartbreaking. Could we have been so mistaken in the men we married? When drinking, they were strangers. Sometimes they were so inaccessible that it seemed as though a great wall had been built around them. Even if they did not love their families, how could they be so blind about themselves? What had become of their judgment, their common sense, their willpower? Why could they not see that drink meant ruin to them? Why was it, when these dangers were pointed out, that they agreed and then got drunk again immediately?
Mm-hmm.
You know, that you have to understand the first step. You have to understand powerlessness to be able to answer that question.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'll tell you, one of the craziest things in the world is to explain to somebody, to talk to somebody about how awful, alcohol is treating them. And then they agree with you, and then get up and go to the liquor store. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, you bet.
These are some of the questions which race through the mind of every woman who has an alcoholic husband. We hope this book has answered some of them. Perhaps your husband has been living in that strange world of alcoholism where everything is distorted and exaggerated. You can see that he really does love you with his better self. Of course, there is such a thing as incompatibility, but in nearly every instance, the alcoholic only seems to be unloving and inconsiderate. It is usually because he is warped and sickened that he says and does these appalling things. Today, most of our men are better husbands and fathers than ever before. And I believe that's true across the board for people who have found recovery. Try not to condemn your alcoholic husband, no matter what he says or does. He is just another very sick, unreasonable person. Treat him when you can as though he had pneumonia. When he angers you, remember that he is very ill. There is one important exception to the foregoing. We realize some men are thoroughly bad-intentioned and that no amount of patience will make any difference. An alcoholic of this temperament may be quick to use this chapter as a club over your head. Don't let him get away with it. If you are positive he is one of this type, you may feel you had better leave. Is it right to let him ruin your life and the lives of your children, especially when he has before him a way to stop his drinking and abuse if he really wants to pay the price? Okay, that's an important paragraph. Hopefully, the alcoholic in the family has read this book. So you've showed them there is a way out. Are you willing to do this? Mm-hmm. And if the husband says, no, I'm not willing to do it, well, you need to now make the decision. Do you want to do you want to keep on till the bitter end, experiencing all the consequences of a chronic chronic alcoholic slide to death, or should you separate yourself and your family? And I think that's each person has to come to their own. And
I've known of actually a gentleman whose wife has that attitude, and he believes in I'm not going to divorce my wife, but he told her, he says, so if you're not even willing to try. She said, no. He says, then you cannot live in this house with the kids. You can't. It's unacceptable. And so she's determined she's going to continue to drink, so she moved out. But you have to set those kind of boundaries. I mean, if you don't, you could end up Right, you could wake up in the morning and you know, mom could have backed over one of your, you know, your 2-year-old baby. I mean, you got to take that sickness sometimes, and like a cancer, remove it from the environment that it's in to save another person's life.
Yeah, no doubt, Monty. I burnt the house down I was living in twice in the last 5 years of my drinking. You know, I mean, yeah, you know,
oh, Chris,
unbelievable. I remember standing in the backyard watching the furniture being thrown out the second-story windows, smoldering, because that's what happened. You know, firemen went up into the house, hit it with the hose, busted out the windows, and started throwing all the smoldering furniture out of the house. And I remember standing in the backyard with my head against a tree, and one of the neighbors came over and said, "Oh, this is just terrible. This is just terrible. Is there anything I can do for you?" I handed him a $10 bill, and I said, "Yeah, I need a fifth of whiskey. I got to stick around. Could you run up to the liquor store for me?" and I thought that was like the most normal thing, you know, to do. Unbelievable. You know, the whiskey is what caused the fire. You know, because you get forgetful about where you leave your cigarettes. Unbelievable. Really is unbelievable.
It is. It's funny now.
You know, we tell stories in some of the support group that, you know, if you were telling that same story, you know, at a Knights of Columbus or something, you would not get the same. Oh, you burnt the house down twice.
Yeah. Mark Lundholm, who is a good friend of mine, and he is probably the most sought after recovery comedian on the circuit as far as comedians go in recovery. And he says, you know, he'll go before an audience of people in recovery. He says, "How many here ever contemplated or attempted suicide?" And usually there'll be quite a few hands that go up, right? And their hands will go up, and they'll start clapping, you know. And he says, "Did you ever think that you would clap for that?" Oh, man.
It is so true, but again, you know, that's a testimony to the power of recovery. That you can not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it.
That's right.
You can use, you know, some of the worst things that happen to you as assets today in your life and in your work with other people. You know, that's good. Some of the most tragic things that happened to me, Monty, were, you know, I can get a lot of laughs about them today. And,
yeah.
I think that's a good turnaround, really. You know, why sit there regretting that stuff forever and ever and ever? You find when you go through the steps and you take responsibility for it, you can move away from it and be free of it.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can look back on it with a whole new pair of glasses.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, but what we're gonna be covering next week is we're gonna get into the 4 types of drinkers / alcoholics. There is really, really great information on describing the progressive nature of the alcoholic. Mm-hmm. Now, this book is very much concerned with something no one is concerned anymore about in the fellowship. But what it's concerned about is it's concerned about making clear the distinction between the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic.
Right.
Okay? It's also very, very involved in finding out where you are on the scale of alcoholism. No matter how far down the scale you've gone, you'll find your experience can benefit others. Your ability to quit drinking on a non-spiritual basis will depend upon how much power of choice you have lost in drink. Mm-hmm. There's all these quotes throughout the book, and they're hammering home the idea, basically, that some are sicker than others. And
sure.
I think it's incredibly important for you to know where you are on the scale. Because what happens time and time again today is a really, really chronic alcoholic will come into a meeting where it's a Bob Newhart Gab session where everybody is heavy drinkers, you know, barely potential alcoholics, and they're not doing the steps. They have no service commitments. None of them sponsor. They just show up, you know, every week to have the coffee and you know, catch up with their buds. Mm-hmm. And a critical chronic alcoholic will show up in that group, and you know, everybody will look at him like, you know, who's like, wow, what's wrong with him? They don't know what's wrong with him because they've never experienced it, and they wonder. They just look at the guy because he relapses and figure, oh, he's just a loser. He just doesn't want it. Now, understanding where you are on the scale. Let's say if you're a type 3 or a type 4, that we're gonna discuss next week. You can't be Bob Newhart in it. Okay.
Yeah.
You got to get involved with a group that gets you into the steps, into service and on a path to recovery, or you're not going to make it. Now, if you're somebody who's an alcohol abuser who might have had a DUI, or your drinking's getting a little bit out of control, and some people are upset about it, so it's time to hitch up your bootstraps. You can go anywhere. You can go to any meeting you want to.
Mm-hmm.
But the big mistake happens today when someone who's gone down the scale really far shows up and nobody is ready to work with them.
Yeah.
Nobody's experienced enough to work with them, and that happens a lot today. And we'll talk about that at length next week, I believe.
All right, good. Yeah, because people fall through the cracks a lot more than we want to admit. They really
way
do.
More than should be.
Yeah, and they don't have to. If we would do a little investigation, I think some of it too is, with folks that have been around a while that actually know better, but they're just tired or frustrated or whatever. It's like, we talked about how free do you want to be? Really, how free do you want to be? And so many people, they get to a point where they're like, I've earned my right to not work with anybody anymore. I've been doing it for years, and I'm just going to retire from that. And I love what Pastor Mitch says. I'll tell you, how many grandchildren Abraham had? You know how old he was before he stopped playing with them kids? There's no retirement here.
Well, if you don't have the time or inclination to sponsor somebody, take them through the steps, that's fine. At least get them to somebody who will. Right. And that doesn't happen that often.
No.
In the rooms, because it's completely misunderstood.
Yeah.
And whatever. I'm hoping that there'll be a person or two who will listen to this that might be helped with the information that we're going to cover next week.
Yeah, right on. All right, more great stuff. Remember, folks, we're going to be making this available to you. It's already available to you. You get 3 free shows. And if you'd like to order this or pre-order it, please contact me here at Take12Radio at Comcast.net. Until our next broadcast, this is the Monty'man and Chris Schroeder, and we are wishing God's serenity for you. Bye-bye now.
This has been a broadcast of KHLT Recovery Broadcasting.